This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, welcome back to the mission of God for the family. I don't know exactly if this one where it fits really well into the series or not, because I want to talk about um, the about taking in media in a wise way, specifically movies and I guess novels, but really movies, television, because and I want to use Aristotle's theory of catharsis um, about just the way that my family has learned to think about movies and what movies are to watch as a family, what movies to avoid, and because a lot of times I think that as deep as we get when thinking about the media for your family is we think we come up with a list of things we don't want in our media, and then we keep that media out. But we don't really think about how media works in a family. And Aristotle had a really, I think, helpful uh, theory about how stories work and public stories in particular. He was talking about plays, but I think for most of us, movies and TV fill the role that drama plays used to fill in people's lives. And drama was more of a public kind of event for the city in Aristotle's day, and now it's really an event for the family. Um, so it's not exactly the same, but it's been helpful for my family, for my wife and I, as we've worked through this. And his theory of catharsis is that a good story has a cathartic effect on a community. A good story, and there's three kind of main, there's three ways people have interpreted that, and in my understanding, all three of them, different stories do a different use a different are better for a different one of the three interpretations. So I think they actually work together. I don't think you have to choose between them and just. But catharsis is the experience of a good of when we imaginatively enter into and enjoy kind of in a technical sense, become a part of the story. We feel along with the characters or feel for the characters. Our uh, uh, that it has an effect on the audience, on the community that's watching it together. And the three interpretations are that there is either a purifying effect of a good story, a moral purifying effect, or there's an emotional purgation, an emotional purging, a, a, um, a venting of emotional pressures, and that an audience experiences together, and then they're united by that purging together. Or there's intellectual clarification. You learn something. You come to a deeper level of comprehension, and the reason that Aristotle says it works this way is because a good story takes universal ideas or universal concepts, and he particularizes them, and that we're the kind of creature that can departicularize back to universals and apply them to ourselves when we have a good taste, or we're the kind when we are uh, slowly transformed into more and more human, or better and better humans. We get better at taking the universals that we see in a story and particularizing them to ourselves, right? Drawing the universals out, and that's really one of the uh, so those three things, we'll go backwards through them. That good stories can do all of those three things communally with the family, and that's why they're important. Why reading novels out loud to your kids, books out loud to your kids is important. Why finding movies to watch together or TV shows or something, that it has a way of knitting us together in all of these different ways. And so the intellectual clarification issue where we learn something aspect of a story is when a story happens and we say, oh, did you see this, did you understand the and we become intellectually engaged with the story together in discussion afterwards, or for my family, we often see a movie, we talk about the technical aspects of it right afterwards, because um, that's something that I care about and my kids have come to care about because I talk about it um, right afterwards. And then, the next day or the next couple of days, we'll start talking about, what else I noticed, right? And you have kind of this long conversation about what you learned from the movie. Sometimes it's learning something moral. Did you notice that this character, they made this bad decision and this happened to them? Or this character was acting selfish in this way and that happened to them? Or they had the moral dilemma and they chose rightly, and then it looked like that wasn't going to work out, right? So they had to choose the moral reason, the moral thing by faith, and so out of that came a good result, even though it started with a bad result. That sort of thing. That intellectual learning aspect is one thing that happens when you are discussing as a family a movie. The purgation is when you have a very emotional experience together and you are bonded by that emotional experience, and it sort of sets things right for you. So, a good sad movie, a really happy movie. I know for our family, for years, our kids would, in their Easter basket, they would get tickets to whatever the next Marvel movie was coming out during the Marvel cycle. Those movies were coming out, and going to them was a lot of fun. I mean, every once in a while, one would be a bomb, but it doesn't really matter if the movie's not good if you enjoy it together. And even the frustration of, I can't believe they did that. That was so dumb. That frustration of, and communication of the frustration that we felt together ends up having a combine an effect where it joins you together because you experience or you purge out those emotions together. Um, I remember coming out of Captain Marvel, and my kids were so upset because they were like, "That was so bad," and or we went to there was a Disney movie that was coming out, and I think the best thing about it was, it was terrible, and listening to my kids just talk about how make fun of and laugh at the movie because it was so bad, right? It has an effect of bringing you together with those by having the emotional purgation is what it's called, together, that it has a social knitting effect. So we've gone to movies that we suspected were going to be dumb movies, but we've gone to them all together and then had a good laugh on the way home, or they tore apart the screenplay or the pacing or something, and they all laughed at it. And it knits the family together. That experience of emotions together has a knitting effect. And then my kids will still bring up the that moment in end I think it's Endgame, where Captain America uh, catches Thor's hammer, and the whole audience jumping out of their seats and going nuts, and that we about how much fun that was. And but that, because we had those experiences together, it has a knitting effect. And Aristotle talks about it in terms of why the city needs kind of what we would think of as mass media that they all see together, because that helps a city stay unified, helps a help. Well, it's really the same thing with families, right? We have the stories that we share, stories that we shared together, that we entered into and were emotionally affected by together. And then the other aspect of that, of Aristotle's theory, is the moral purification aspect of stories. Where you, when you see a story where the bad guy, you get really upset because of the kind of person he is, and then he gets it in the end, right? That actually has a purifying effect on our morals. Or when a character that you connect with, but then they do something that destroys their life, and you sort of experience it along with them. It trains your moral imagination to have the experience of what comes after bad decisions with the character, so that now your moral imagination is better ready to face the moral situations, moral decisions of your own life, right? Um, all three of those things really do happen, and it's good when they're happening as we watch movies together. And when a family gets really caught up on one or the other, uh, and then um, you don't have the balance either in terms of then what movies you choose to watch, or don't choose to watch or avoid. You end up with an imbalance, because if you're only looking, for example, for movies that give good moral guidance, um, then it's I mean there's you're not going to find as many you're not going to have as many good sort of knitting together experiences. Or if you're only looking for movies that are intellectually satisfying, but they never really move any of the kids emotionally, you watch just documentaries all the time and that sort of thing, then you don't get the knitting together effect. But if you're only choosing movies for their emotional effect, because we're going to have good experiences together, you may end up picking movies that don't really train the moral imagination and don't help the intellect at all, right? Where you're looking for something that brings a real, true family catharsis, that brings you together and helps you be knit together as a small community, by looking for movies and TV shows that sort of do all of the different things, right? So my family watched a lot of Psych together, because the laughing together is really good for the family. But it's not a it doesn't there's not a lot of intellectual stretching that goes on with just Psych, right? So, but when we watched the documentary Gothics together, we had really great discussions with our teenagers about cancel culture, right? But it's there's some emotional aspects to it, but really it's teaching you this is what happened um, during the height of cancel culture. This is the way it destroyed people's lives. This is why you don't treat people this way, right? It had a intellectual and a moral lesson, really, and it was really good. But you've got to always be um, you, uh, careful, or just aware of your own biases, right? When you're teenagers, at least for us, our teenagers hit an age where they started to want to watch horror movies, right? And the reason is because when the world expands for a teenager, it's scary, and a good scary movie has a way of purging that fear and kind of resetting your fear meter. You learn to control and be aware of your adrenaline and different things like that, right? So it can have a really good effect. But there's a lot of terribly immoral horror movies, so you have to start saying, okay, can we find what are where and knowing, like, you've got some young teenagers and old teenagers, where do I find some family friendly horror, right? And just um, because if that's what you're teenagers, those are the discussions you have to have as a parent. You want to still be guiding them through those years, and just understanding how movies and TV shows work, right? So uh, that this way of thinking that Aristotle develops, and then Horace and some of the later uh, philosophers of story, I guess you'd say, um, that really helped us know how to pick the kind of movie that was good for our family. And we didn't always nail it. There were times that we said, "Oops, that movie wasn't great," or that was, but it's all part of, and but being able to say, yeah, that movie wasn't great. Here's the problems I had with that movie, and teach your kids how to make story judgments along the way as part of it. And so if you never make a mistake, you don't get to talk through. Well, here's the mistake. Here's how I made it. I I use the parent the parent meter at IMDb a lot. That was where I went because it enumerates out what's in the movie for parents in advance, and found that a really helpful tool so that we didn't make any huge mistakes like, oh, that one had a big nude scene in it or something. But there are a lot of movies where you walk out and you go, that was trying to make something that was bad beautiful, and then just have those conversations, because we don't have to be afraid um, of movies and TV shows. They are a tool that helps us become wise, helps our kids become wise, and helps form our imaginations towards what's good. That's the goal, and even a poorly executed movie can do that when you've got a good just conversation going about movies. And sometimes your kids will see a movie and they'll be like, oh man, that really moved me, that I really liked that. And you go, oh, I know that there's not that's not good. And so you say, what about it did you like? And help them learn how to separate out the good things, because usually it's because of some good thing that they like it. They're not like, it's because I really love adultery, right? That's, you're 14-year-old, 15-year-old, but you're like, oh, but that movie didn't condemn adultery. And you say, and they say, oh, it was really beautiful, or this character I really connected with. And you can say, okay, well, I get that makes sense, that's good. What about this aspect of it? Did you notice that it was promoting this bad thing, right? And help them work through learning to reason and separate out the good things from the bad things, because there's very few perfect movies, right? Maybe The Princess Bride is a perfect movie. A Double Indemnity, a perfect movie. There's very few perfect movies. Um, the Double Indemnity is a tragedy, by the way. So, but it's like, if you read Hamlet and you think I know this is the greatest work in English of all time, arguably. And usually you don't come in and say, well, here's what I think is wrong with Hamlet, right? You come in saying, oh, something is wrong. It's probably in me. But when you've got but most of the time you're dealing with some sort of mixed good and bad, and so helping your kids learn to separate that means that sometimes you just have to have conversations. What about that did you see that you thought, I really connected with that? Okay, well, did you see this also? And help them learn to separate, because a lot of wisdom comes down to being able to separate out the good from the bad, because to be able to say, here's how I would have fixed that problem with it, and work through the moral reasoning or the emotional reasoning, whatever it is, in order to help them gain the perspective of wisdom that they're going to need to be able to interpret stories their whole life. So hopefully that's helpful.